Hello everyone, welcome to the first episode of a brand new series here on the channel. This is the first episode of Star Wars Home Video Year by Year. I'm your host, Nathan P. Butler. If you are unfamiliar with me, if you're just jumping in to check out this series, my background includes a lot of different things within Star Wars fandom. 20 years doing the most comprehensive Star Wars chronology available anywhere, being one of the early and longest running members of the Star Wars podcasting community and so forth. I did get a chance to contribute officially a couple of times in Star Wars Tales and assisting with the Essential Atlas, but the thing that's probably most relevant to these episodes here is that I am the host of a series here on the same channel called From the Star Wars Home Video Library, which, if you count all the supplemental episodes, has run about 600 or so episodes looking at Star Wars home video items in depth. Looking at the product, looking at the packaging, looking at how it fits into the broader history of Star Wars on home video. I am also the author of books on the subject. In 2017, I initially published a Saga on home video, a fan's guide to U.S. Star Wars home video releases in paperback with grayscale images and such. But then in 2021, I launched a 3-volume second edition that's about 1,000 combined pages with about 1,500 color pictures, all from my own personal collection here, which you can also find now on Amazon. There is a paperback version of each, yes, full color on the inside. There is a sort of deluxe hardback edition of it that you can also find on Amazon with glossier pages, or if you really want images that don't lose quality by being printed on paper and you want something that's more cost effective, there are print replica Kindle versions also available on Amazon. So I've literally wrote the book, so to speak, on Star Wars home video, particularly for the US market. So that's me. I love Star Wars home video collecting, been doing it for a while now, and I want to share that love here as well. There aren't a whole lot of new releases coming out for Star Wars home video. There are a few. The Disney Plus series are finally getting releases as of the time that I am recording this first episode here, but there just aren't a ton to cover. So From the Star Wars Home Video Library is putting out episodes from time to time. But there's not a lot of new stuff to cover. Most of it's been covered already. So the idea came up, why not combine my love of Star Wars home video with my love of history, kind of like I did with a Saga on home video by giving a narrative history of this stuff, but do it as a video series in kind of the vein of one of my favorite Star Wars books of all time. That is, you probably guessed, Star Wars Year by Year, A Visual History. I love this book. I have all the different editions, even the odd sort of mid-step edition that came out. I also have books like this for other stuff, like I think it's Batman, Marvel, and so forth. I love visual history books like this that go year by year through the history of a franchise. So why don't we do that in video form for Star Wars home video? My intention will be for each episode to only run about 5 to 10 minutes. This one will probably be longer because it has the introduction here, but about 5 to 10 minutes. Bite-sized Star Wars historical home video context here. One for each individual year, starting in this episode with 1977. As we go along, though, as I release these episodes, I will go into the descriptions after release and add in some links. So you'll have links to the episodes of From the Star Wars Home Video Library that go much more in-depth with the items we talk about in these short episodes here. And I will include information out where you can find even more information about those particular items if they appear in a Saga on home video second edition, or even if you happen to have the first edition that is now out of print. Because my goal is to use this to sort of introduce the evolution of Star Wars home video to those who are maybe unfamiliar with it or simply have a passing interest in it. And those who do want more in-depth information, well, that's where the existing parent series, so to speak, of this will come in. So again, I am Nathan B. Butler. Welcome to Star Wars Home Video Year by Year, Episode 1, where we're going to be taking a look at 1977. So let's go back in time together to 1977. I wasn't even born yet. I couldn't even do a Sam Beckett leaping back in time to 1977, because in the original Quantum Leap, he had to leap within his own lifetime, and this is 2 years before I was born. But really the story of Star Wars storytelling, at least for the masses, actually goes back a year further. In November of 1976, the original Star Wars film's novelization, ghost written by Alan Dean Foster but credited to George Lucas, was released in bookstores. So you could already know the story of the original Star Wars film before it ever hit theaters. Later on, in 1977, in March, April, and in May, prior to the film's release, we had the first 3 out of 6 issues of Marvel Comics adaptation of the original film getting released. So half the story was kind of known from the Marvel comics at the time, although both of those adaptations didn't quite match what we would see in the final film. It's in May 25th, 1977, that we see the theatrical release in 32 theaters of Star Wars, the original Star Wars film. And I'm calling it Star Wars here, but will later often refer to it simply as A New Hope. I am one of those folks who is a stickler for the idea that once you get past the subtitle being added, Star Wars is the name of the series, A New Hope is the name of the episode, in order to keep things straight. Even home video releases don't keep things straight that way for a while. But in this era, prior to 1981, yes, the film is just called Star Wars at this particular time. So it's released in theaters in 1977. It will continue to roll out to other regions throughout 77, even into 1978 for its first runs in theaters. It will get re-releases year to year, as we will eventually see. But this is a very different era for home media than what we would see throughout the bulk of Star Wars' lifetime as a franchise. Beta as a format had been introduced in 1985 in Japan, eventually wound up in the US that same year. What we think of as VHS, kind of the staple of the 1980s and early 90s home market, that winds up being introduced in 1976 in Japan, winds up in the US in 77, the same year that the original Star Wars film hits theaters. Laserdisc won't really get going until 1978, after the film's already been in theaters, and it won't be until 1981 that the CED gets released. CED, what the heck is that? We'll see when we look at 1982 and the first full releases of the films. But home viewing options were limited and fairly expensive in this particular era. What was more common was watching films not on home video, but on a home media known as Super 8. These are film reels. So we wouldn't see a full release of the original Star Wars film on home video until it actually had the A New Hope subtitle on it until 1982, 5 years after its theatrical release. This is nothing like today where releases come out on home viewing about 2 months or a matter of weeks, give or take, after anything for theatrical viewing. This was a long wait. But there were still some glimmers of hope if you wanted to capture that Star Wars magic in the home through Super 8 and another couple of media out there. You have small selections of selected scenes on short Super 8 reels here that were available in 3 different formats. You had black and white, color, and color and sound. Yes, sound was somewhat of a luxury on the smaller reels. You also had larger reels in similar packaging, all labeled F48, in a box or a clamshell for that same type of packaging here. These all coming from Ken Films, by the way. And there was a second larger reel that you could pick up as well. And this second reel was actually available in widescreen if you got the CinemaScope version and had the proper lens to watch a widescreen copy of the film. Not much to these. I mean, we're talking about, in this case, 17 minutes at 360 feet for that particular reel. It's by far not the entire film, but that didn't matter. You couldn't see any of the film at home without these. So it was a way to capture certain impactful scenes like the escape through hyperspace and the battle with the TIE fighters and parts of the Battle of Yavin and going to the cantina and all in bits and pieces spread across all these different Super 8 reels. There was hope for the home market. But that's more of an adult thing. What if you were a kid? It is a film series, as George Lucas has said, aimed at kids after all. Well, for that, you'd need a blaster. Nope, never mind, not a blaster. A Kenner Star Wars movie viewer. It came in a package that basically looked like this. The Star Wars movie viewer here was packaged with 1 out of 5 cartridges that would eventually be released. Again, coming from Kenner. Kind of hard to find these in good condition or with the box these days. But basically what you had was little cartridges here. Again, there were 5. May the Force be with you actually came with it. You would take it, and you would basically stick it in and snap it into the viewer. Hold it up to a light source. Look through the lens, and crank to view about 1 minute of footage from Star Wars. Again, cut from different parts of the film to make for some really kind of weird viewing at times. Now, as you notice, it is a cartridge, so you can swap these out. And yes, in 1977, 2 more were released alongside the movie viewer. You had Battle in Hyperspace, a misnomer, because there is no battle in hyperspace within A New Hope. And then we have Destroy Death Star. Not Destroy the Death Star, but Destroy Death Star here. So if you were an adult, you might pick up the Super 8 reels. If you were a kid, you might pick up the Star Wars Movie Viewer. Heck, if you were an adult, you might pick up the Star Wars Movie Viewer. It might be a nice option to see a little bit more of the film. That was the US market. In 1977, it was Super 8 or Star Wars Movie Viewer, or you were waiting around for a while for more Star Wars content. We'd see more stuff released before 1982 when the full film would be released, but it was pretty slim pickings back in 1977. And I would note very briefly that this would come out in 1979, the Star Wars Give a Show, and sometimes this is confused with another option that did exist in other markets from 1977, but that ain't this. In other markets like Italy in 1977, you had sort of a cross between Super 8 and the Movie Viewer with what was referred to as the Minicinex. It is essentially a small projector that you put a reel of film in, and you then crank, as it uses D batteries to project a very light image on a wall or a screen. You then still hand crank it to project certain selected scenes from the original Star Wars film. They looked like this. Again, just a hand-cranked projector. You had to open up the entire thing to take out the film. And yes, the film was on a reel, as it would be for Super 8, unlike what you would see with those self-contained cartridges for the Star Wars Movie Viewer. So in the US, you could have Super 8, you could have the Star Wars Movie Viewer. In other regions, you might have something like the Minicinex, but not a whole lot for viewing Star Wars at home in 1977. But at least, as the first chapter of A Saga on Video calls it, there were glimmers of hope at this point. Next time, we'll take a look as the Star Wars Movie Viewer library expands and Star Wars gets a re-release in theaters in 1978.